And good Monday morning, evening, afternoon. I don't know. Maybe you're going to sleep as you listen to the show. I don't know. I don't know how you live. Anyway, welcome. This is LoreForged, the podcast for AshesOfCreation. Welcome to everybody here from Twitch over here at LoreForged Live. We're recording this live over the airwaves, and we are your hosts. This is episode 36. My name's Jibs, and I'm joined by Sonny Ravencourt.
I like the idea of somebody listening to this show to go to sleep. That's a fun thought. It's like, you know what I need just to really knock me out is a good podcast about a game that won't come out for 11 years.
Dude, let me tell you, we've gotten some emails over the years. Like, people listen in the shower, people listen going to sleep, people listen as they're driving their truck drivers and they drive across America. Like, it's a thing.
I listened to Conniff's podcast while I was training for a marathon. So I'd be like at mile 12 or 13, just cursing his name, listening to him talk about, Diablo or something like that.
Oh, that's good. We could introduce a third guy, or we could just keep this conversation going and have the whole show just you and I.
I'll just introduce myself. My name's Cash. My dream for this show is to have somebody write into the show, or maybe even call in and tell us that they're listening to our show while they're making babies.
Oh,
what? Wow.
Nope. Are you going to flag that one?
I have a white flag. Does that mean surrender?
That means surrender.
Okay.
I'm not sure if it's I don't know if it's a good idea,
What's Kel say? She's here.
I feel like there's a lot wrong with it, but yeah, I mean, the chat is clearly flagging this. I'm just more concerned about I just don't know if it's a good idea. I think it was ill-conceived.
I don't want my scathing voice to be the cause of somebody to lose the mood, as they say.
Goodness.
Almost guaranteed.
Almost guaranteed.
I do have a mention though. Last week we had some issues with some rubber banding and some things that were really driving us crazy as content creators. So as soon as the show ended, and obviously we felt bad because we knew this was going to be a really bad edit for Jibs. But Sonny, you started doing some research for me, and then we had somebody step up from our community in a massive way. And really, he went to work and kind of never stopped, because we were getting pings, throughout the week, and you were saying, "Hey, try this," and this person said this. So anyway, I really want to send a huge amount of thanks out there to Rogue C, who is one of our family members at LoreForged, and really just thank you for taking the extra time, which you did not need to do, but you took the extra time to really go through some diagnostic stuff for me, and I think the issues are fixed, which is fantastic because it came out of nowhere. So anyway, Rogue C, thank you very, very, very much.
Yeah,
much love from the whole crew.
Seriously, my goodness. Oh, yep. Goodness.
Well, I learned a lot. Did you? Just watching him work. He was having me download things, and then I would test it before we'd send it to Cash, so that it wasn't super crazy and couldn't explain it. And just the IT world, watching an IT person do IT stuff is about the equivalent of what a Dark Ages person would see and call a magician. It just doesn't make any actual sense. It's like discovering quantum mechanics. It's just wait a minute, when I look at the thing, it does a different thing just because I'm looking at it. None of it makes any sense to me, but it was baffling, and it was pretty cool. And honestly, the results actually were there. So it was pretty neat.
Yeah. Yeah.
I really enjoy how you made that seem, like you had to test everything out and dummy it down before you sent it to me.
I'm sorry, have you ever tried to teach yourself tech?
Seemed like that?
Mom always say things in a way which I could understand.
My wife one time told me to explain to me like I'm 5. And that's how I think of Cash with technology.
Yeah, this is accurate.
Well, everybody, thank you again so much for pushing play, hanging out with us. We sure do appreciate you. This week on the show, we are doing KOTOR actually makes its return. Pretty stoked about that one. We haven't done one of these for a while. And then a roundtable discussion. It's the first time we've ever talked about this. We talked about it, actually, I think it was a couple of weeks ago. We said we're going to do a deep dive on this, and we're doing it right here on the show. And we are talking about the weapon skill tree system. We saw that in the fighter showcase in a big, big way. And so we're going to be talking about that here in a little bit on the show. But Sonny, KOTOR.
Yes. So one of the things with KOTOR, which is check out this thing on Reddit, is that these guys don't see KOTOR before I just kind of spring it on them. And sometimes this is good, and we're going to see if it's going to be good this time, because this is actually a pretty good question. So every now and then I peruse Reddit, which I am becoming more and more of a fan of. It's not nearly as bad as you would think it is. And as the game progresses and gets closer and closer to launch, you tend to find these these gems inside of Reddit of like just good questions. And I'm hoping that as the game comes out, that you start to get really cool stuff. MMO players are creative. So this was a question that I saw that really kind of made me, think like, oh, yeah, this is good stuff. So let's see what happens if I ask the guys this and see if they actually have an answer or if they don't have an answer. So the question came from the name Wumpus Among Us. Which is
what?
Solid Reddit username right there.
I
right?
love it.
And the question was, what was a major reason you stopped playing an MMORPG that you hope that Ashes of Creation successfully addresses? So I'm going to give you the example that he says here. He and it's a long post, and I'm not going to go into the whole thing, but he basically says, I started playing New World from early beta, and I really enjoyed it, and I continued playing post-launch, and after everyone bailed on the game, I was still playing it. But I stopped playing after all the exploits, but came back for the fresh start servers. And the one thing that made me give up the game was bots. So he goes on, and he basically goes on to this whole thing about just how the game got overrun with bots. And he says, this was the reason why I finally just hung it up. So no more New World. It had too many bots, and the bots just ruined the whole thing. So his question is, well, I mean, he says he's going to play Ashes of Creation, and he swears that like he hopes that they address bots. That's his one thing, right? So that's why he left a previous game. So I'm going to start with JB on this one. JB, the question is, what's something that you had in a previous MMO that you just hated enough that that was kind of the reason why you stopped playing it, that you're hoping that Ashes of Creation doesn't have or addresses?
Okay, so before I answer that, TGF Tavern just rated. So Chibi and DJ and all you wonderful people, we love you. You are such good people. And for all of you here,
cheers.
Real quick, if you have not watched the Golden Feather Tavern, goodness gracious, go show them some love. Amazing people with an amazing community. So thank you all so much for being here. We love you all very much. To answer this question, what basically was the final nail in a coffin for me? And you know what? I'm going to tell you this before I give you my answer. I regret leaving when I did. Because I really was enjoying my class. And I think because I stepped so far away, it disconnected me from my character and my class. And so therefore, when I came back, I had to kind of start all over again. And it just never really felt the same in a lot of ways. And that for me was World of Warcraft Shadowlands. And the mechanic that drove me away specifically, to answer your question, Sonny, was there was a mechanic in there called the Maw that you had to go in there, and they had Torghast and stuff. Long story short, without going into the details, it put you in a place where it forced you to do something that could have been great had it not forced you to do it. So whenever...
It's like a daily, like a required daily.
But it even felt like it had more weight than that. So it's like for you to like really get into the story and everything, like you had to do this. Whereas had you not had that requirement, that have to mentality, this could have been a great thing. And it could have been possibly a feature that possibly saw further mature along the line. So for me, it is whenever a game puts something in the systems that could be great. If it just allows it to happen when the players want it to happen, when they want to do it. But the moment that you take a great feature and you put it behind a have-to mentality, a have to go do this thing, it automatically takes the fun out of it. And you know what? If it is fun, it's not fun for very long because it's a have to thing.
That's a really good answer. Oof, Cash. I don't know. You got anything that can come close to that?
I think I do. In my humble opinion, I love that he went Warcraft. I mean, it's Warcraft is such a good example because it's such an iconic cornerstone of the MMO history market, and whatever you want to call it. You cannot deny. I know we talk a lot about it, but it is the 800-pound gorilla in the room when you want to talk MMOs. So I like that he went there. I really think the low-hanging fruit on this is New World, and I love the fact that the OP on this particular thing in Reddit went to bots for it, as opposed to the umpteen number of other things he could have chosen as to why he left New World. So anyway, that aside, I'm not going to pluck the fruit off of that low-hanging branch. The one I am going to do, because it really did take a chunk out of my soul as a massive Star Wars fan, and yes, I know that this is my go-to, also happens to be one of the inspirations for Ashes of Creation. And the game that I believe was ruined was Star Wars Galaxies way back in the day. And the reason for that is they released something after the game had been out for quite a long time, more as a money grab. I would say Sony Online Entertainment did this particular thing, but they took a sandbox game with so much choice at the way you built your character and the way that the game worked, and almost overnight they turned the game, or they released a patch that they called, I think it was a new game experience. It was some type of a new player experience. It's called the NGE, right? Was it the new game experience?
Yep.
And what that fundamentally did was changed the design of the game and how you built your character. And it basically took all of these different classes that you could spec into, and it lumped them into this was just one of the things that one of the features of this NGE. They basically lumped all these different character classes into like a larger archetype. And when you logged in to a character that you had been playing and loving and enjoying and had built, they forced you to start back at character creation and pick a class. Now, granted, all the experience that you had transferred over to when you picked a new class. But the reason that this made me so angry is because this is a game, Star Wars Galaxies was a game that made you earn, through various things that you had to unlock in the game, you had to earn a force sensitive slot. You can only have one character in this game. You had to earn a force sensitive slot through various things that you had to do in the game. And it was a very rare thing. And I had unlocked my character slot to be a Jedi. Took me so much time to make this particular thing happen. But at the time, in the time frame that this game was built, the time frame in Star Wars, Jedi were very rare.
Quick question for you. Is that your greatest gaming achievement in your gaming life?
Oh, wow.
No.
Ooh, I know where he's going.
Achieving lore master in World of Warcraft was my biggest gaming achievement.
Impressive.
It was.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I just heard you say that one. I was like, that's a pretty big deal.
It was a big deal to make Jedi. So the fact that now with this new player experience, new game experience that they launched overnight, any player coming in could pick to be a Jedi. And it destroyed their core vision of the game. That is why that is my largest one. To this day, that game was still one of my favorite MMOs of all time to play. I loved my experience there. I loved the fact that it was very difficult to get my character where he was. And then they ruined it overnight.
Let me ask you this.
absolutely takes the cake for me.
Let me ask you this on that note, Cash. Quick follow up. So do you okay, number one, how long do you think, had they not done that update in SWG, how long do you feel like that game would have lasted, like in a really healthy way, possibly grown? Also, second follow up, how do you feel had they not made that change? What kind of MMO space we possibly could have seen? Like, how could that have affected the genre if that had not changed? I know it's kind of loaded.
I'm going to answer number 2 first.
Okay.
I feel that had that not changed, the game would have kept its popularity enough for SOE to continue to support it. Once they did that, once they introduced this new game experience, enough veteran players were pissed off about what they did, changing the core mechanics of the game and everything that they had built. They left. It killed the player base of Star Wars Galaxies. Therefore, because of that, the domino effect became that SOE stopped supporting and building the game, and the game died because of that. So I had to answer 2 to get to my point on 1, but I really truly believe that had they stuck with their core vision, their core player base would have stayed and they would have continued to make money, their $15 a month or whatever it cost, and they would have continued to support the game and build it. So I think it could have lasted a lot longer than it did had they not made that design choice.
Yeah, it's a really good point that you make at the end there, where you say that it's not the introduction of the NGE, it's the changing of the core value, right?
Right.
Like, that's the bigger picture here. And you talk about a game like Ashes of Creation when you bring this whole thing full circle. And Ashes of Creation is a game that has pillars. And Steven has said, we will not compromise on these pillars, right? We'll make all sorts of changes around the periphery, and nothing is set in stone around these things. But we are not going to have PvE servers, right? We are not going to have PvP servers. We are a PvX game. That is a pillar of this. Like, a pillar is risk versus reward. Like, those are things that will be in this game. And if he all of a sudden says, maybe we'll do PvP servers, you know, like, what are we talking about here, right? Like, are we in the same boat? Do we run that same risk, Cash?
I think in a way you do. I think the only style of gameplay that they might get away with to make an actual an official server for, or official servers for, is roleplay. Because I don't think with roleplay you're changing the core values of his vision, of the vision of Intrepid for this game. If you start doing that with PvE servers, you're going to have to start implementing rules that might limit PvP. And remember, PvE builds the world, PvP changes the world. That's a core vision. And the same thing, if you have a PvP server, then maybe perhaps you start changing some of the rules in regards to PvE. So honestly, in my opinion, I just to reiterate, I think the only gameplay style that may warrant and they might get away with having dedicated servers for is roleplay, because I don't think that roleplay would fundamentally change the core vision of the game.
I agree with that. And on that note, I want to go to Sunny first and then Cash. So when it comes to off that, so the roleplay servers and within Ashes of Creation, do you feel that players would have a better experience or have the opportunity for a better experience if there are roleplay servers? With everything we know about roleplay, with everything we know about the story and the deep diving and the backstory and all the politics, like good, like in character, in game politics between guilds that can take place, do you feel like players could have a better experience when it comes to having an RP server?
I don't necessarily think that they have to, but I don't think that it would be, like Cash said, destroying one of the pillars. I think that if you included an RP server, that it's not taking away the PvX environment. You'd have to allow the PvX environment to exist, Okay. Like you'd have to allow the bounty system to do its work. You'd have to allow that danger to the caravan system to exist. Like you can't fundamentally change the game to have it be less. Remember, all those pillars are tied together, right? Like PVX is tied to risk versus reward, which is tied to player agency, which is tied to like all of these things, right? Like they all work together, and it's a house built on these. You can't knock one out without having problems down the road. But I don't think that introducing an RP server necessarily knocks out the legs on one of those pillars. I think that you can have it. I think that what you're doing is you're just basically providing like a space where you say like, look, these people are going to be a little more into it as far as the role play goes than the average person. And maybe we introduce some like name requirements so that you don't get the old XX Bong Slayer sneaking his head in there. And I don't have a problem with that, right? Like Bong Slayer's got plenty of room over on the regular servers. You know that he's going to be there. So yeah, I actually don't think that's a problem at all. I don't think you need it, but I wouldn't be opposed to it.
Cash?
I think my thoughts on the same thing, or we've kind of talked a little bit about it before, is I am okay if they don't do a role play server. I don't think, again, that it would ruin any core experience or ruin the PVX experience. If they did do it, and of course I would prefer that they did do it, because we like some role play flavor. We're not hardcore role players, but we are somewhere around like beginner to medium role players when it comes to stuff like that, because we just like that extra layer of flavor in our gameplay experience. So I would love it if they did, but if they didn't, I'm just going to throw this out there, which we talked about, I think, a couple episodes ago. If they don't do dedicated servers, which they've already stated they will not, we're just going to go, and I don't even want to say behind their back, but the players are just going to name servers the unofficial this or that.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So
yeah.
I'm kind of okay if they don't. I don't think it's going to make a giant difference for us, or whether or not they do in the RP respect. But any other major aspect of gameplay, yeah, it's going to kind of F up the PVX environment.
Abarat in chat says, do you think there are 15,000 people who could keep that server active? That's a great question. I mean, arguably, you could say the same thing possibly for any of the servers. Whenever I think of RP servers, so Sonny, I don't know if you know this, but I've been dabbling in RP and Warcraft again this week. I made
this week?
Yeah. So I've been dabbling in Warcraft with RP this week. And
okay, Cash missed it. JB said that he's dabbling in RP Warcraft this week.
Yeah.
Oh, so you're going to Goldshire?
No. Do not do that thing. Do not pass
I just
go.
learned what this is. I just
do not
this.
collect $200.
I was 1 week old when I learned this.
I was today old when I found out about all the things that go on at the Goldshire.
Still to this day, Sonny, I love you, and I love pushing your buttons because we love you, but I don't even want you to see that thing, man. That's awful.
No, he has a tender. Yeah, he has a tender heart. I don't want to ruin your tender soul.
No, you don't need to see that. But anyway, no. So I've been diving into RP again. So for research, for things that are going to be happening in the future, possibly with LoreForged. And I wanted to see some things firsthand. I wanted to get an understanding of better things with rankings and how things are ran and whatnot. And lo and behold, I found this Dark Iron Dwarf Guild, and these guys were all lined up, just doing their thing. And I'm like, excuse me, what? Dwarfs? What? And so, like I'm learning, and I'm like just watching them do their thing, and they're talking, and I'm like, the more I got to watch them, the more I'm thinking, I'm like, I don't care what anyone says about roleplay. It is a real art to type in chat like you're Scottish, like a full sentence, and do it really well.
Yep. And saying things like "can I?"
Yeah.
Am I wrong?
No.
Is that a CA apostrophe NAE?
There's a lot of apostrophes.
That's almost exactly what it is. Yeah. I mean, the way that a dwarf actually talks, I mean, it is a complete art, and I'm with you on that. And I mean, especially having to do that when your dwarf character is down to its skivvies in the upstairs bedroom at the culture. I mean, you want to keep impressing her, right? You don't want to ruin her experience.
Oh man. But one of the things that it just really impressed me was some of the backstory that happens, because it's just, and I don't mean to derail this too long, but it's just the point of that, watching people develop story, because everybody loves a good story. I don't care what movie it is. Everyone loves a good story. And that's what happens. And look, this is coming from a guy who was a PvPer. Real talk. Aside from Star Wars: The Old Republic, I was a diehard PvPer. And a Scotian Lotrox, that was my first real MMO experience. Cash was the one in 2018 that got me into PvE, and forever really changed, aside from SWTOR, my time in SWTOR, my time in questing with love of lore, all those things. And so back in 2018 is when my eyes were open to no longer just hardcore PvP. You know, if it's red, it's dead, whatever. Like, no, I make those jokes on here, but real talk, it's, you know, like that's when my real love of story and lore and things really started. So 6 years ago now. And now, fast forward, you can still enjoy PvP and, you know, have all those fun and competitive natures and fun things that go on. But also you can enjoy good story and people who write these stories for their characters. And then I got to see people like, and this is where I'm finishing it. I'm sorry again, Sonny, I know you have a point, but like these people were like, I attended because I joined the guild and I attended. They had a whole like ceremony to bring their people in so it's not just like clicking a rank. Oh, you rank up. No. It's a whole ceremony that goes on. And I remember just sitting back watching, and I'm like, again, PvPer who loves story and lore, right? And PvE now. I'm sitting back. I'm like, gosh, I know they're not going to call my name, but dag nabbit, I wish they would. Because just watching it happen was the coolest thing. It's the coolest thing. You do a gaming podcast. Shut your mouth. So, like, at the end of the day, like, if they could do something like this for Ashes in some way that helps facilitate that, it doesn't have to be a server name, but just something that's facilitated. The player base, like Cash said, will take the reins. They'll run with it. But hey, man, that was a good time. And it's still a good time because you get to just watch story happen 24/7. So, you know, whatever.
I mean, we've said this a number of times, right? Like, you give the players the tools and they will make it happen, right? And that's a good example of that, right? There's nothing other than buy-in that took place with what you saw. You just had buy-in from like a lot of different people and some basic tools that you gave the players to make these things happen.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. 1000%.
Yeah.
Yep.
It'll happen. I mean, it will happen in Ashes. And I mean, I hope that they give us the tools. The more tools that they can give us, the better that we're going to like give them content. That's for sure.
Right.
I can almost guarantee this is such a role playable game, and they're setting things up. Like, you'll even notice with the lore, my friends, they are not releasing too much lore right now, but only a foundation for which all of these guilds can build their story, right?
Yeah.
And mostly I'm talking a lot of RP guilds. There's so many people out there that just could give two shakes about RP, and it's totally fine. But there's other guilds out there that are super hardcore about it. Jibs, we're doing some research, and what was the name of that one? Oh my God, I want to shout them out because
they're fantastic.
Is so good.
Yeah.
We'll have to find it. But gosh, their site, and they're an AshesOfCreation guild. They're just absolutely amazing with the stuff they're doing. But we're probably going to land somewhere in between. We want you to have that flavor as a LoreForged guild, but we're not going to hold people to it. Like, if you don't like RP, then you just don't like RP, and that's fine. But I really think that the story of Vera and what they are doing is they're laying out just enough of a foundational story for you to be able to grab hold and run with what you want to run with. And thank you, Jibs. He found it. It's called the Gilded House. And they are an RP guild in Ashes of Creation.
Mm-hmm.
If you're an RP fan, go check them out. Unbelievable stuff that they are building right off the bat. And it's just very, very impressive and just a fantastic spot for us to gather some ideas from and everything. So if you're out there from Gilded House, then our hats are off to you. You're doing wonderful work.
And much love. And see, that's the thing, like, I would love to be a part of. So like if they were able to, and again, I know we like have other things to talk about, but this just keeps going. Like if they were able to label a server and we know where more RP guilds are going, that's where I want to be, because you're going to truly see Game of Thrones experiences happening, because it becomes more than just game mechanics. It's the game mechanics that are already on a level that's not happening in the industry right now. And then you combine that with the art of storytelling of people, you know, truly espionage, truly the whole, oh gosh, what's the name of the MMO? Sci-fi MMO, EVE Online experiences going on, you know, and it's just, and then you have scribes that are recording these things, or however that's going to work in Ashes of Creation. I mean, it's just, there's an opportunity there. And look, I'll be the first to tell you, if they're wherever the Gilded House is at, cool. You never know. Maybe we'll be there too. You know, like,
it'd be a great server to pick, right? Like,
it'd be fun.
It would.
Yeah.
Of all the guilds out there, to say like, I'd love to share a space with these people. Like that, they're on the top of that list. They're very high up on there.
Oh yeah.
Because you know it's going to be a good time, right? Like
exactly.
It's going to be a good time.
Exactly.
I have an answer. It's a very brief answer, but I feel like it doesn't take a lot of explanation. The thing that drove me out of New World was the fact that the map was so easily conquerable by a very large guild because of the server size. The server size was a problem. When you had a guild that took over the server, which was feasible when you only had a max of 2,000 people on there, they just dominated. And then when they left, there was nobody left on the server. So it like worked. It was the worst on both ends, right? And then you had an empty server, which is the exact opposite and just as bad. Nobody wants to play in a dead MMO. That was the problem that we had with SWTOR, is that you're walking around these like giant places and you're like, you're like John Travolta just with your arms out like like where are the people? What's going on? So that was my answer for this.
And I love that answer, Sonny, but let me ask you this. There is a lot of talk out there about Ashes of Creation, the servers in Ashes of Creation being completely run by Zerg guilds. So like, what's your answer to that? What happens if that same thing starts to happen to the servers in Ashes of Creation?
I mean, this was the question that Burns posed to the Bespoke crew for his season 2. And I think pretty much emphatically most people said like, yeah, big guilds run servers. And my counter to that is, okay, increase the server size, right? Keep the guild caps the same, increase the server size, put more space in the map, right? Put more space, put more people in. And that's, I think, how you counter that kind of stuff. Are you going to have it? Yes, you are, right? But I mean, they're aware of it. At least they're going to give bonuses to small guilds. They're going to do stuff like that. But it's just hard to combat big guilds. More organization almost always wins. Like if you look at, this is like we're talking big picture here, but if you look at like the history of war in this planet, it is not armies that were composed of people that had good knife skills. It's composed of people that were really good at moving food, right? Like it's the UPS army is what wins a war, right? Logistics wins wars. And that's what you have with an organized large guild, as they're just logistically very good if they are capable of doing that stuff. And if you're big and have numbers and the logistics to move things around, then yeah, you're going to dominate. But the counter to that is you just make more space, right?
Yeah.
You put limits on the big guilds, you give bonuses to the small guilds, and you just make a ton of space. Right. And so hopefully you get a really big server size to combat that. That'd be my answer for it. And that's the best I can do, right?
I was trying to
probably the best person to ask that particular question because of how good you are at those RTS games and actually having a strategy in those things. So yeah, I'm just gonna throw it out there. It's
all logistics.
Very impressed that you pulled logistics out, because I was gonna say Zergs is what does it. But no, you're right. Like, well, because you figure like the Roman army, that's like one of the ultimate Zergs of history, right?
Right.
And they did pretty effing good for a really effing long time. So, but yeah, you're right. Like if they don't have logistics and trade routes and, and supply lines really is the biggest thing. And yeah, I'm pretty impressed. Totally gushing on you right now, Sonny.
That's what they do, right? They went and they'd set up a town, and then they just move out and set up another town. And they were just pros at it. They didn't even go to sleep before they like built a town. It was crazy. But that's how you do it, right? It's a great question though. And it's certainly one. The best feeling I have is that they're aware of the issue, right? So hopefully these are the kind of things that get solved, right? And I think that's the nature of this particular KOTOR is these have been issues in the past. I hope these guys know that they're issues that could potentially ruin their game. Let's see if they address them. That's it.
Yeah.
I have one honorable mention here. It's not even worth a conversation, but it is one of the funnier things I've seen in a while. I'm posting it in our chat, and I'm going to post it in the other chat here. And you got to take a look at this because I thought it was absolutely hilarious. And it is a picture of a skyline filled with god-sized beings fighting what appears to be a giant war, stabbing each other with long swords. And then you have this minute, tiny dude on a horse on the beach, and it says, "Me collecting plants," versus the main story of the game. And I thought, so that tracks. That's about right.
I am going to post that in there in chat for our friends. That's
You're
pretty
gonna
funny.
have to. Oh, I already threw it up there.
Good.
It's already
did you?
for the friends.
Oh,
yep,
my bad. Yeah,
it's
you
there.
did.
But you might have to post that on Instagram as well, because it truly does encapsulate some of our players inside of LoreForged. They're just like, the story's great, but dude, have you seen this plant?
Mm-hmm. This plant only comes out at night, you guys.
Right.
Oh, that's good.
All right, and that's KOTOR. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. We went a little longer than we normally do, but it was a good conversation.
That was a good one. My goodness.
Money's worth on that one.
We only did 40 minutes on a KOTOR, which I think is fantastic. It turns out people on Reddit they're pretty smart. That's some good questions.
It's a good question.
Oh, well, everyone, it's time for that roundtable discussion on the weapon skill tree system. Now, we put this out to our community earlier this week. Hey, we want to hear your thoughts and opinions. And we gave them all week to answer. So we are pulling from some of the answers that we got. And now one thing that we did see was there was a lot of people, and admittedly, I was talking to Sonny before the show, and I know he's included on this, as well as I. This is kind of a difficult thing to understand. The weapon skill tree it's like defined, but it's not defined all the way. So we're kind of going over what we have. And so the first thing that we have here really to kind of explain what this is, and then we're just going to kind of open this up as we go along, is a quote from Steven Sharif. And he says, quote, "Weapon skill trees are skill trees that you can unlock and invest points into as you continue to develop your experience with certain weapon types, certain weapon groups, like a dagger. And when you're doing your basic combo attack with those weapons, which is universal for all classes, anybody can use any type of weapon because stats can be changed on these weapon types through crafting and through drops. There will be certain proc effects that live on the weapon skill tree as you advance in them, and those proc effects will be able to interact with your archetype skills because they will have promotion type effects that occur when they synergize one another." Oof.
That was one sentence.
Holy Lord. My good gracious. And then Steven Sharif continued, "Our approach is not going to be providing skills through weapons. It's going to be providing skills through classes." So, gentlemen, weapon skill tree system. Now, we saw this with the fighter archetype, probably in the biggest way that we've seen so far. We saw a little bit with the hunter, yeah, but we really saw it with the fighter. And Cash, I'll go to you first. When we were really watching that archetype video, none of us knew that they were going to show the weapon skill tree system. And about the I have it marked here. Let's see if I can even pull this thing up. 47-minute, 42-second mark. They spend the next 10 minutes just talking about this system. So what are your takeaways from this system so far? Like, what are you seeing that stands out to you? Like, where's your head with this thing?
The thing that really stands out to me about this system is the amount of flexibility it gives you to build the character that you want to play. I think that there's some hard stops in there that are probably going to change the way a min-maxer builds their character. But for the most part, like the one thing that I think about when I think about building the character you want to play is, say you want to play a character based off of Gandalf, right? Where you have a character that uses a staff, but he also has a sword. He's got a one-handed sword on his belt, and he might pull that sword out and utilize it, right? So here you have this strange mix of classes that you normally would not see in MMOs. You wouldn't see a wizard or a mage with a sword. It just doesn't make much sense, because the mage or the wizard is going to have, they're going to have more strength and power in something that gives you, or that has mana, right? So magic abilities, not necessarily physical attack abilities, which would require a sword, strength, dex, agility, things like that. But at the same time, in Ashes of Creation, if you want to build that character, you can. It might at some point at the very top end, to a certain small percentage, gimp you, because if you were to, say, have a bunch of mage skills and then you pull out this sword, you're probably not going to have, if you're spec'd into everything for your mage, you're probably not going to have a whole lot of power in said sword, but you still have the ability to do so if you want. Mm-hmm. Look at, we talk about RP a lot, but look at our peers. Our peers are going to be able to build whatever character they want to build for their RP endeavors. You might want to change those things to max out your character a little bit again, max out the stats and abilities of your character once you get into the world again and you get out of the tavern where your RP event is, but you have the ability to do so. Some games, such as World of Warcraft, weird that we would bring that up again, but if you're a certain class, you cannot even equip certain things, right?
Yeah.
If you're I couldn't equip a two-handed sword if I was a hunter in World of Warcraft.
Right.
It's red to you. Can't use it. But in Ashes of Creation, the ability for you to do so is there. So at face value, I love this system. I love that it's different.
Mm-hmm. Sonny, what do you think?
I think that, like, Cash brings up a good point at the end there, that forcing a class to behave a certain way by limiting their choices is kind of an old school concept. Like, it seems like it worked 20 years ago, but now I think that we should be more clever than that. That we should just find ways to allow the players to do these kind of things. And, maybe some things work better than others, and maybe some classes are better at it than others. And maybe that's how you funnel those things in there. But the hard limitation of not letting a hunter pick up a sword it's kind of dumb, right? Like it's not necessary anymore. So I agree with that. The problem I have with this is that his quote at the beginning makes a ton of sense. And then right after he says it, he says, our approach is not going to be to provide skills through weapons. It's going to be providing skills through classes. But really, the weapon system is a whole thing based on skills of the weapons. So I get kind of where he's going with this. The idea is that your player and the class is going to have the ability to do certain things. The weapons are all about procs, okay? The weapons are all about synergizing a weapon into what your class can do. And it's, if you can think about it, like Penumbral said in there, is like, if you think about them only like augments, then it kind of works, right? So a good example is when he's talking about, and this is a quote directly from Steven, he's talking about a dagger having slash effects. So if your dagger has slash effects that bleed the target or cripple the target, then every time you attack, you have a chance to proc that effect. And then that effect can synergize with your active skill tree that has that available to it. So you can continue to build up those sort of bleed effects. And so you're trying to build inside the weapon the ability for him to bleed more and for it to proc different kinds of things off of those things. Now, it's not the attack itself, right? It's not the style of attack that is going to cause them to bleed. They're going to bleed because of your skill as a character. But when they do bleed, if you have this particular, skill tree on the weapon, then all sorts of things happen as a result of it. So it kind of gets back into talking about like meta builds, right? If I looked at that skill tree and I was like, whoa, there's a lot going on there. There's a lot of different paths on this thing. And the more paths you can have and the more creative you can let the players be, then I think that, you kind of get both ends of it. You will get a meta that some people swear up and down is super OP and people will go to that. But you'll also get much more creative answers on the other end because you have just a lot of options. So this is a really interesting system to me. I don't know how they're going to balance some of it. Because when you have a system that relies on multiple procs of different things stacking off itself and creative characters that are able to get these things, it really does introduce some balancing nightmares because things can spiral out of control in a hurry if you have a clever player that's able to, find those combinations of how to get things going. The upside is high skill level for some players.
Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead, Cash.
It's all ball bearings these days, Sonny. It's all ball bearings. I make that super old effing.
I love that reference. I love it so much.
I make that old reference to lead into this. It's numbers.
Ball bearings.
I really, it's all ball bearings these days. I really think that's from Fletch for you youngins.
Fletch.
Okay, it's from Fletch.
Fletch. Come on, Fletch.
But I think it comes down to numbers. So I like what you're saying. Like it's going to be hard to balance. This entire game is going to be really difficult to balance. But in essence, something like this does come down to number. It comes down to numbers and stats. If your character is statted for magic, obviously you are not going to be very good at wielding a two-handed hammer, right? A war hammer. You're just not going to be, but you can. That is the beauty of the system, is that you can. If you want to build your character to do that, you can. It doesn't mean that most players aren't going to find the secondary weapons or primary weapons that augment their class, and pun intended on the word augment, correct? But you're still going to have people min-maxing the crap out of stuff. But the fact that it is a completely separate system where your skills are split. I was really looking for a super cool word that made me sound smarter right there, but I couldn't find it. So your weapon skills are going to completely be different from your characters, your class skills.
The word you're looking for is bifurcation.
I know bifurcation because the trachea bifurcates at the carina. And
see, this is what you were looking. You had it. You had it.
It is, but I've had exactly I've had 0.75 ounces of a whiskey. So
it's somewhere in there though. Like if you look, it's probably in the bottom.
Debuff.
Swirl it around and find it.
Oh, geez. Yeah.
Debuff?
So anyway, to cap my thought off, it really does come down. It comes down to numbers. People are still going to min max, but the beauty in this system is the fact that you can if you want to.
Yes.
I love that.
I love it.
Yeah. I think it's going to, when it comes to min max, like if you're wanting a very specific thing. I think the beauty of Ashes of Creation is you're going to see a lot of different things work in this game. You know, oftentimes you play an MMORPG.
I hope so. Right.
And they're like, hey, if you're this class, well, you need to focus on this stat and focus on this weapon and this armor. I think there's a really good chance that Ashes of Creation is not that way, mainly because of the way it's built, particularly when you see the weapon skill tree. So, Sonny, you brought up procs. Procs is a part of it. You have the combos that are a part of it. We saw that with the fighter archetype. Passives are a part of it. You know, the beauty to me in an MMORPG, it's not the meta. Forget the meta. And by the way, forget tier lists. One of the most toxic things in an MMORPG are tier lists. They change with every patch. Who cares about a tier list?
You do. You do. I know you do. You've read those. Yes,
I have. And you know what? I had to tell myself to stop because they're so toxic to the person. Just like singularly, that one person who's reading that thing, because it automatically takes out all the exploration, takes out all the fantasy and the what do you want out of the character, right? But anyway, point being is this.
I agree.
That ultimately this game has appears at face value a lot of options. A lot of options. And one of the most beautiful things in MMO is when you take people who are like on a simpler MMO who are refused to follow the meta, and they soar above people with something that's not meta. Something that just like, what? You're doing what? And look how good they are with it. And you're seeing these YouTube clip highlights, right? Well, that's what I love to see in Ashes of Creation. Insane Axeman asks, what sort of risk versus reward would you like to see in the skill tree? Example, like in Star Wars, if you go down a dark path, you'll lose the light side abilities. Cash, what do you think?
Cash,
I think I caught him mid-typing.
You caught me right in the middle of typing an insult to you, actually. It was a comment about S tier lists and the fact that I was literally typing you've never picked a character lower than S tier in your entire life.
That's not true. Have you ever seen The Hunter? You know where we rank. Oh, come on.
I know. It's insanely fun.
No, next time I see you, I'm flicking you in the nuts.
So what I'm going to require of you is to repeat that question.
I'm going to take the question first, you amateur. I'm taking the question.
Go ahead, Sonny.
All right. So the question is risk versus reward that you'd like to see in the skill tree. I think that it's not that hard. Like, I think that plenty of games have done the risk versus reward in the skill tree. It's all about like speed versus damage. It's all about bleeds versus crits. It's about things like that. I think that you want that within every weapon should have those choices, right? I think that every single weapon should have that. Now, maybe as I say this, I'm thinking like, does a two-handed hammer, I mean, can you really build in a bleed on that? Maybe like crush, maybe you just crush the crap out of them and they just bleed. But it's not like an acute strike. You're just bludgeoning them.
It's probably not going to proc much.
No, right? But like in my mind, I want every weapon to have those kind of risk versus reward choices, right? Like where you have to, risk versus reward is like a balancing act. So I want to see that you have to pick your style of play. The same way that they're building the characters, where you have a healer, a cleric, that has to pick how that cleric wants to heal. Do you want to heal in big, long, massive bursts? Do you want to heal in little healies? Do you want to heal in, hots type of thing? There's all sorts of things like that that should happen. I think that the question is good. I mean, he poses it in a way that makes it seem sexier than it actually is, because he says like in Star Wars, this is very common in Star Wars games. If you start picking light side stuff, you can't pick dark side stuff. If you start picking dark side stuff, you sure as hell can't start picking light side stuff, right? Like
Ray did. But Ray did. She got really mad and she did the Force Lightning and killed Chewie.
I mean, she was channeling Grandpa.
Turns out you read a book.
Oh, that's right. She was a Palpatine. Sorry about the spoilers, everybody.
So a little retcon in there. But it's not that hard, right? Like you just have to balance those kind of things. But like, is there a weapon in the game that you shouldn't do that to? Like, I don't think so. I think you should do it with all of them. So, it just makes it more interesting. And some weapons will be better at certain things, but it doesn't mean that they can't do all of the other things if you pick it, right? I don't know, Cash, what do you think about that?
Let me rephrase this question for Cash because I know he missed it because he was typing earlier.
Oh my! Here we go. Simple Jack.
What sort of risk reward, Cash, would you that? Let me restart. What sort of risk versus reward that you would like to see in the skill tree? Example, like Star Wars, if you go down a dark path, I can see your head bobbing out of my peripherals. Down a dark path, you lose the light side abilities.
What is this, a center for ant?
It's to be 3 times as big.
I can read my own, you googly. I think when it comes to risk versus reward with this system, what I don't want to see happen is I don't want to see the skill be outweighed by stats. I would like to see the risk versus reward lie in your skills, meaning if somebody decides to take the lesser stats by going a mage with a 2-handed sword as an off weapon, I want to be able to see skill still matter. Their personal skill in combat, I want to see that be able to matter. Whereas if they choose not to go with the meta, it's not going to make such a dastardly difference that no matter what their skill level is, they're still going to get crushed by a meta player. That's what I want to see with this risk versus reward. So not only do you have the ability to wield an off spec type of a weapon, if I want to have a healing staff or a staff with some stats in it as a ranger, if I want to do that, I still want my skill to outweigh the stats, the stat loss that I'm getting by not going with the meta. Does that make sense to you guys?
Yeah, I think it does. I think that there's a real attraction to when an MMO says like, and by the way, like I believe Guild Wars 2 did this. When you're in PvP, your gear doesn't matter, right? Like it is entirely skill based. And I really enjoyed that. I thought that was super cool, right? And it gives players like a sense of like, me that doesn't like neckbeard my MMO all day long, 7 days a week, like I can still do this, right? I love stuff like that. So if there's a way for you to find the character that you love and play your battle mage and get really good at it, that you can still go out there and do it. That's cool. So there's a couple questions here, and Katie asked 2 really good ones. So I'm going to do it, but you have to keep your answer to 30 seconds or less because I'm going to ask them both. So we're going to do one lap here.
We all know that's
calling you out. We've been recording for an hour. Not everything is calling you out.
No, it's whatever, Sonny.
You're never going to believe me anyway, so might as well just move on, right? Okay, so here's the first question. Here's the first question for you. I want you to name me some of your favorite skill/combat progressions or trees from an MMO that you've played in the past. Okay. So think of MMOs that you've played in the past. I want you to think of a particular combo or a skill or something like that that existed in an MMO that you played in the past that you just have a fond memory of.
Easy. I'm going to go.
JB, you're first.
I'm sorry. I just jumped right in.
No, you got it.
Thank you, because I am completely lost on this one.
All right, perfect. Cash, remember the mage skill tree line in ESO? And the only way you could level that thing was you'd have to get the lore books. That was the only way. And that and the quest experience. And the rep kind of thing. They redid that skill tree. I think it was with the Somerset DLC, which still to this day, one of the most beautiful DLCs in an MMO. It was just beautiful. Well, anyway, they added this skill, and I have only ever, truth in all truth, been able to appreciate this skill from afar because I never earned it. I was never able to get to that high of a rank. I think I was only able to get maybe 60% of the way through. And I don't even remember the name of the skill, but it was like once you hit level 10 rep or skill with the mage tree, it was it was like rewind time. So like,
oh yeah, that was a Sigic skill line.
Yeah. Oh, was that what it was? Sigix. I'm sorry.
Sigic skill line.
The Sigic order.
Yeah,
that's
sure.
right. Good call. And so you would be in one place and you'd hit the button and it would rewind you where you were 3 seconds before. And I always just thought that is the coolest get out of jail card that,
super cool.
you know, like that was able from a technical standpoint, able to be programmed and animated really well. And you saw the visuals that would go along with it and the sounds, of course, right? But just to see it all come together and actually work, I'm just like, oh, that's like chef's kiss. That's well done.
That's impressive. Cash, you got anything?
Yeah, and I think I'm going to go to ESO too, because I think ESO is probably the game that I did the most deep dive of a study on my actual build. And it was for 100% min-max purposes. And I know I've already talked about on our show, I've talked about the fact that I've spent hours upon hours in my house in Elder Scrolls Online perfecting an off build. I do want to say that it was not an S tier build. I was running a bow warden. And if you play ESO, you'll know where I'm coming from. But I was able to get my character to the point to where I was doing some just absolute sick, stupid DPS on him. And for that reason, I was able to get into some of the really good raid groups, trials groups, in my own damn guild. Hey, you guys. No, it was my own rule that you better earn your damn spot. I don't care who you are, you're going to earn your damn spot. So I remember just going through these combos with the warden. I have no idea if I will, I absolutely will not remember the names of these skills, but I just remember having to get good at the warden rotation to where it was ingrained in my mind, and the combos that you had to do had to be perfect, timed with perfect light attacks in between each skill. And I apologize, it's been a little while since I played ESO, so I just don't remember what those skills are called. But one of them was like where you time it perfectly to where you're doing like this snipe shot and it lands right when all these little bugs from another one of your skills pops out of the ground, and I would just see numbers just fly off whatever I was attacking. And I'm just going, yeah, dog, that's me doing all that damage. That's me.
I remember back in the day.
Did anybody see who was at the top of that chart? That's right. It was me.
I remember back in the day too, we'd have conversations off the show and behind the scenes from the guild and stuff. We'd just be talking like, what are you doing? Oh, I'm watching a YouTube guide on rotation for the warden. Oh, cool. And that happened a lot. You were a study on the warden.
I was. And you know what? I was okay with it because I loved every second of it. Now, when I think back on it, I hated the weaving. You had to weave in light attack.
Yes, I was going to bring that
heavy
up.
attack.
Like, you saying that made me
tough.
just like,
It was like tough. That. But the one thing that it did do was add an element of skill.
That's true.
To every single one of those classes. And I think my whole point to that is that particular combo that I had to learn and was ingrained in my mind was not an S tier build. But hearkening back to what we were talking about before, you don't have to be an S tier build. You don't have to pick an S tier class that is hitting on all cylinders right now. What you need to do is be damn good at your class. And that's where I got with this particular build for my warden. I wanted a wood elf that just used bows. That was it. And that is exactly what he did. And I was able to get good enough at that class to equal or surpass the big boys. And that made me very happy.
In your own guild.
In my own mind. and my own guild. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I don't know. I don't like the weaving. I think we all agree that it definitely added a level of skill to it, but man, that's a whole nother show unto itself.
Please,
Whether
Steven.
or not you need to add weaving into something like that. Oof.
Please.
For me, the answer is going back to SWTOR. I played a scoundrel. This is one of my favorite MMO characters of all time. Absolutely on my Rushmore of characters. Her name was Sunny. No surprise there. And she was a scoundrel, and she had a sweet blue cape. It was awesome. And she had this thing where she had basically a sawed-off shotgun. And I would stealth around the battlefield. Love to play PvP, and it was always like a sort of capture the flag type of situation where you'd have to go and stand on a flag for a while. And so they would always see that this flag was unguarded, and I'd be there, and they'd come over and they'd stand there, and they just knew, right? They just knew that they're standing there just waiting for the badness to happen. And I had worked out, and in hindsight, this might have actually been illegal, because I found out that you're not supposed to like make macros for SWTOR. I don't know if that was the case when we were playing it back in the day, but you definitely are not supposed to now. But man, did I macro the hell out of this thing. So I figured out that if I timed the macro exactly correctly down to like the 10th of a second, that I could throw like a charge on a person, sneak up behind them, like I'd throw the charge and put the sawed-off shotgun right into their back and pull the trigger, and the gun would go off, and the charge would the gun would detonate the charge. And it was amazing. It was like
shot.
Poison charge, shotgun goes off, and it all explodes all at once. And all of a sudden the person was down like to half health. It didn't kill them, but let me tell you the level of over the curve response, like of panic from a person when they're standing there and all of a sudden they hear this loud bang and they're at half health. Like your fingers don't work anymore. Your characters are running around shooting in the distance, just pulling triggers. Good. It is amazing. So like the psychological element of it was just my favorite. So that's just a special moment in history. I don't know if I'll ever be able to recreate something like that, but it was one of those things in time. This is the last question, and this might be the last question for this entire thing, but it is another Katie one, and it is a really good one, I think, to end. And the question, I have to see if I can get this exactly right. Like, can you think off the top of your head of a weapon skill that you have not seen in an MMO before that you think would be fun to incorporate into Ashes of Creation? So like anything in the top of your mind that like you could think of a weapon that you would, if this weapon could do this thing, or if you had this ability or had this skill inside of the game for whatever class it is, that you would love to see inside of Ashes, because it would be super, super fun.
I'm going to go with, so we've seen a lot of dagger throwing in MMOs, but it's always kind of an afterthought. Like it's always just like, I mean, like there's a lot of MMOs that have it. I know rogues have it in Warcraft, where you just throw a single dagger, right? It's like to get aggro. I don't have an exact skill, but I have like a premise. Something I would love to see something done more with throwing of daggers, more than just you throw a dagger and that, but no, there's something there's a little more oomph to it. There's something, I don't know, something that
maybe like an FPS approach to it almost.
Maybe. Yeah. I don't know, just something that's just a fun new take, just because we've only ever seen it. I mean, well, we've seen it here and there, but it just always feels like an afterthought. So I would say something that's, like what's the next level of throwing daggers looks like? What does that look like?
Axeman has a very similar one, and he says crossbows. I feel like crossbows are sort of the same conversation, right? Like crossbows do exist in games, but you never really get like crossbow feel, right? It's the same thing with daggers, right? Daggers are in games, but you don't really get that. So that's an interesting one, like how do you make daggers super cool in an MMO? Cash, what do you have for something like this? It's something you haven't seen before, but would like to see just for fun in Ashes.
My mind goes directly to ranger abilities and something that I could tie into a bow, like some cool, amazing, like Legolas, like something where you one shot like kills two enemies if they're lined up in a line or something. Not one you have seen. You've been able to see like a shoot through. The one thing I haven't seen, I think this would be a really neat combo, particularly if your ranger as a secondary weapon type use daggers, which I probably will. Some kind of a gap closer where I fire my bow and it closes the gap between me and another character, and I immediately pull out my daggers for some kind of a backstab or an eviscerate or something like that. So there's risk versus reward there, because you are sacrificing your range, which a ranger, yeah, pun intended, a ranger absolutely has to have the range. You're sacrificing your range for a big attack if you can time it right. Imagine catching a character that's got its back turned to you. You sneak up to the back line and you're targeting, say, healers or casters, and you use this gap closer to fire your bow, and maybe somehow it like pulls you in with a line or something. And then as soon as you close that distance, you go immediately into like a double dagger stab or something like that.
Ooh.
That'd be a really neat move.
That'd be hot. So when I was younger, I feel like I've never been young. I played a game called Commandos, I believe, and it was.
Yes.
You guys feeling me on Commandos?
Yes. Oh,
yeah, it was
man.
a top down. It was a top down, like kind of stealthy,
like
So
a
good.
slow World
Yes.
War II strategy. You're
Yeah.
moving guys around. Well, there was one guy that had the ability. Well, first of all, like the distractions were fantastic, because you'd throw like a pack of cigarettes and these Germans would roll over them and be like, wow, they come over and they'd see the pack of cigarettes, they'd be facing the wrong way. And you could come up behind them and you could just hit them with a blackjack, right? And then they're knocked out. Well, you could do certain things with these guys. You could either just shove them into like a bucket or something like that, and they're out of the way. And so long as the other Germans don't see them, which, by the way, the sound of the Germans seeing a dead German is forever burned into my mind, because my roommate would yell it all the time because he liked to play the game too. And so when something was happening, he'd be like, it's just the funniest thing in the world of these Germans sounding the alarm. I have no idea if that means anything in German, but he would just run around all the time yelling it. Anyway, my point is this. If you were around a corner and you could have a gun to a guy and he was just a couple feet away and he knew there was a guy right around the corner with a gun pointed to him, he would do things like he'd call his friends over, or he'd do something like that. It was basically a puppeteer sort of mechanic. And you don't see that in MMOs. And I would love it if you could have like a summoner, or maybe a mage that had some like affinity for the dark side, to be able to sort of cloud someone's vision and more or less puppet them, like almost Harry Potter style, to be able to do what you wanted them to do. So maybe they walk up to somebody else on the node and like they get to cast one damage ability or something like that, right? Like stuff like that, where you're able to do a little bit of puppeteering on something like that.
Katie had a really good point. Hide in a haystack.
Hide in a haystack would be great, right?
Like whether or not like that's for a rogue particularly, or maybe it's a skill that all classes could go into, but there's different things throughout the world that you could hide in.
Yeah.
You know, ESO had something like that, like where you could hide in like barrels and stuff.
Yeah.
It would be interesting though, like if you had to spec into it, right? The same thing with like the secret doorways in dungeons and like certain things that you had to be a rogue to unlock this thing, you know, or disarm this trap. Hide in a haystack. It's a great example. So there's all sorts of good things with that. So JB, I think that's probably going to do it. Do you want to take us into the end?
I will, but before I do, Sonny, June 24th, 1998, Commandos Behind Enemy Lines. Amazing game, dude.
So
it was
good.
Such a good
Do you have
game.
a link? Do you have a link to it? You got to drop it into the
I do.
chat.
I will.
It's
I will.
like-
And it's also it's ranked
Commandos
9 out of
was just-
10 on Steam, which is crazy. It's covered with very positive
I
reviews.
wonder what it looks like now. I probably couldn't even play it. I think they did a remaster of it a while ago, though. I want to say that they did. I mean,
Yeah.
it's truly one of those unique,
Yeah.
spectacular games.
Yeah, 90s. I tell you what, were dominated a lot of ways with the top down, and that was, he was talking RTS for you. That was the same for me. Age of Empires, Total Annihilation Kingdoms, RTSs, Commandos, just so many top down. But anyway,
God, I'm looking at the screens from this thing, and it's just so good.
I know.
With the sight lines and
Yes.
everything.
oh,
Really ahead of its time.
it really
Truly.
was. It was a good game. Well, hey, everybody, we hope you enjoyed this episode. This was LoreForged, the podcast for Ashes of Creation. Let us know what we're doing. If you enjoyed the show, whether it's on the comments section on YouTube, a lot of you love to watch on YouTube, or whether it's the RSS feed on a podcast app, let us know how we're doing. We sure do appreciate it. And don't forget, you can always call us 516-875-1776 for the mailbag segment, and you leave your voicemail. I promise it doesn't bite. You can leave your voicemail, or it won't send you a virus either. It's clearing. It's clean. It's good. You can leave your voicemail. We'll play it right here on the show. And also, you can email us, as always, as so many of you do, loreforgedhq@gmail.com. Commando Ravencourt.
You can go to loreforged.com to find links. I loved my favorite guy was the Navy SEAL guy, like the skinny guy that would put bombs, and he just looked like a dude that was like, I don't know. I mean, like the guy that's 6'4" and beefy is scary, but I'm a little more concerned about the 5'7" guy that looks like he needs a sandwich. Like, I don't know what he's doing here, but that guy's gonna be a problem.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. Gosh, that's good.
LoreForged.com to find links to all of our Ashes of Creation content. You can also go to YouTube for all of the fantastic videos that these guys are putting out. They are really spectacular. And that is at YouTube.com. Thank you very much. That is at youtube.com/@LoreForged. And finally, Twitch. Nope, not finally. Twitch.tv/LoreForgedHQ. I've been streaming a lot of Foundation, but guess what comes out next week? Manor Lords. Manor Lords will be the last game that takes me into Alpha 2. Manor Lords. Very excited about that. And finally, for me, you can get all of our content early and much, much more, including the State of the Owl, over at patreon.com/LoreForgedHQ cash.
Friends, join our Discord community. We have a pretty fun community over there, and we're getting some really neat family members in there. So come on over and join us. We are actively working on the details of the LoreForged Guild that will be announced and ready to rock for Alpha 2. So it's a little bit more in depth than we thought it was going to be, but we're working on that pretty diligently right now. Don't forget our Discord is wide open for anybody to join. I would imagine at some point we're going to be talking about guild caps and stuff like that for folks joining our guild, because we just can't have too many people in the guild. Anyway, follow us on X if you want at LoreForgedHQ. Follow us on Instagram. We are at LoreForgedHQ, and look forward to some fun videos coming out every Friday and Monday.
And Monday. All right. Well, everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. We appreciate you. Everyone here at LoreForged Live, you guys are awesome. We love you. Thank you so much for everything. And as always, have a wonderful week in gaming. We love you, and we can't wait to see you next week right here on LoreForged. Take care, everybody.
Peace, love, and honeybees.
Safe travels, adventurers.